it's super easy for me to write, produce, and record a love song because it's like kind of like my bread and butter a little bit. Like I can just write those like nobody's business.
He's a singer, songwriter, and producer. He has toured Canada and England. You may know him from his songs We'll Be Alright or his new single Flowers Don't Bloom. Please welcome Josh Sahunta to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. It's Friday. Looking forward to the weekend. So,
me too.
Yeah. So just kind of to kick things off, what was your first experience with music, or what made you first get into music?
Honestly, like, just the same way anybody gets into anything, I just thought it was really fun. It was more of a hobby, if anything, for a while, and that's kind of just how I started off. I just, would jam with my friends. I'd come home and play piano and drums and the guitar, and I found that I just lost sense of time when I did those things, and I would think that I was doing it for like an hour, and it's like 3 hours later, it's like, whoa, like the whole evening's gone. And so I think that was around the time when I started realizing that it was maybe something that that could maybe be more than a hobby someday. And I mean, I've only started doing it more than a hobby since about 2017, so it hasn't really been that long, but for all the time before that, it was just for fun.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned playing all these instruments, guitar, piano, drums. How did you learn all these instruments? Were you traditionally taught in each of them? Are you self-taught in all of them or any of them? How did you kind of learn all of these instruments?
Yeah, I self-taught myself pretty much everything I know how to play, from like YouTube videos. It's funny because that's like the nice thing about growing up in the YouTube era is like you have so much access to free content and free videos, and you can basically teach yourself how to play anything. And I did piano lessons when I was really young, but I just hated them, and my parents eventually told me that I didn't have to do them anymore, which was great because it just ruined it for me. I just liked learning songs by ear, and I would hear a cool song on the radio and come home and play it by ear, but then I was so like, I just dreaded having piano lessons, and it was so boring, and like I hated the songs we were doing. And eventually, my parents were like, yeah, we're not going to waste our money on this anymore if you don't like them. So I stopped doing piano lessons, and that was probably, it's funny because now I wish I could do piano lessons again, and maybe I will someday, because now I like have an appreciation for like the music theory side of it. But when I was younger, it just like, it made me not want to play piano, and maybe not want to play.
It was like playing what you thought was fun or cool, and just playing the songs that you liked.
Yes.
when back then, when it was more of a hobby and you were still growing up, were there any other thoughts or dreams you might have had for what you wanted to do in life other than music?
Yeah. I played pretty high level soccer growing up. My whole family's from England, and so soccer is just really ingrained in our culture and everything. So I grew up playing pretty high level, and I thought maybe like I was like maybe 14, 15 years old. I was like, I had dreams of potentially going pro and stuff like that, and then I hurt my knee really bad, and basically stopped playing club level, and took a lot of time off to recover. And that's kind of when I was like, well, I can't do anything physical for a while, so music is the most obvious thing. So I just like played a lot of video games and played a lot of music when I was off soccer. And then actually this past winter was the first year that I've gotten back into soccer. So, but anyways, that's kind of what at one point I was like, I want to be a professional soccer player.
And feel free if like you don't want to go into it and all that, but would you happen to tell the story of what happened to your knee or like that injury? I had this thing, and like a lot of people have this. It's like a pretty
common thing to have, but it's called Osgood-Schlatter's disease, and it's basically like you get it in your teenage years usually, and it's like a muscle condition, if I remember correctly. So that just like it was causing me so much pain every single time I did any kind of running activity, like any activity where you run and then you stop very quickly and then you change direction. So very much like soccer is the worst,
Yeah.
and like that disease is actually like most common in soccer players who are like in their teenage years. And so I had that, and it was really bad. And then I had one game where I landed really funny, and I don't think I didn't break anything, but it was like a really, really, really bad, like just a landing, and mixed with the condition I already had, it was just not a pretty situation. And I just remember like, and it's funny because I still have like lingering knee pain. Like if I sit for too long, my knee just starts like going crazy. And it's funny because like I could go for a hour-long run and I'll be fine, but if I'm sitting down for too long, like my knee just starts going crazy. So I have no idea. I just always had like knee problems, and it's just never ending. But
so now the knee problem is kind of more like inactivity rather than like physical activity and jumping around, running around.
yeah, and I mean, like I try to work it out like a lot so that it's not going to get worse when I get older.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned a lot of like really cool techniques for like strengthening your knees and like avoiding future injury. So I've been implementing a lot of that. So yeah, it's a constant learning struggle.
Has that knee kind of ever affected like playing live or tour life or anything like that?
No, I mean the worst that I could possibly say would be that sitting in a tour bus for a long time was really crappy, or being on an airplane for long flights. Like those are pretty brutal because you're like really tight against another seat, so it's like it's really hard to stretch out my knee. So but I mean, as long as I'm able to like get up and walk around the cabin every now and then, like it's usually manageable.
Mm-hmm. And so what like tips or advice would you give to people just starting to get into music or just starting to take it seriously and trying to make a name for themselves in music?
Yeah, it's really an interesting time to be thinking about that question because, coming out of a pandemic, nobody is an expert on this anymore. There were definitely tried and true ways to grow as a musician before the pandemic, and like I would have had so many answers for that question if you would ask me that 3 years ago. But
yeah, I was gonna say the answer has just changed probably so much from 3 years ago.
Lot. Yeah, because like I would have said like get out there and perform and like play open mics and play like all as much as you can, get in front of as many people as you can. And you know what? In some places you're able to do that now, and things are opening up, but it's not the same. And I wonder if it will ever be the same as it was before. But the world is so online now, and the number one way that I'm seeing people get like major record deals is off of TikTok and just having some sort of social media virality type of thing. But I don't know. Like I think one thing that I've been really figuring out is like figuring out how to define success, because success for one person will look completely different than it will for another person. Like for me, I make a full-time living doing music now, which is something that I was never able to do for most of my life. And I'm not like, I'm not super famous. I'm not going to walk down like Hollywood Boulevard and have a bunch of people want to take pictures with me. Like absolutely not. And like I've had some really cool milestones in my career, but by no means am I like a viral artist or anything. But I probably make more money than a lot of the viral artists. I'll put it that way. Not to be cocky or anything, but like I know a lot of these artists who are like very successful with like TikTok and stuff like that, and a lot of them like make no money at all. And so it's like, but they would probably be people who you would maybe recognize, or you would be like, oh, I've heard your song, oh, I've seen you on TikTok or whatever. But like that doesn't always necessarily translate to making an income. Um, Unless you're really smart about the way you market yourself online. Like there's so many different things that go into it. But my point being is it really just depends what you're after. If you're wanting to be like a famous, like get signed to a big record label kind of artist, well then you have to be on TikTok. You have to be on Instagram and Twitch and like all these different platforms and putting out and playing the game essentially. You have to be, and I'm sure you're aware of this, like as a creator, like you know, you got to be putting out content like every day.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be like a TikTok every day, 3 TikToks a day, 4 TikToks
It's
a
all
day. It doesn't
about
matter.
consistency, regularity, because as soon
Yeah.
as you start to just kind of sporadically or randomly upload for almost any platform, you're going to get recommended less. It's going to
Yes.
pop up on less playlists, less platforms, less algorithms, whatever the platform is.
Exactly, and I mean, and you yourself, you're more on YouTube, right? So like,
Yeah.
that's even more important because YouTube used to be a place where you could post sporadically and you could still do well, but now, like YouTube is so much different. Like you have to treat it like a TV channel. You gotta
Yeah.
your new episode has to come out every Tuesday at this time, otherwise you're gonna confuse the algorithm.
It's not just random that you're saying all your favorite creators have a schedule Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yes.
Some of them crazy enough to do daily. Like it's not they just decided to like try to balance like a work life balance and have it like regularly scheduled. It's because that just inherently and has been proven to help them reach a broader audience.
Definitely. Yeah, totally.
So when you reach that level of being able to use music as like a sole moneymaker for you, as like the way to support yourself, what was that feeling like? And did you kind of feel like you had made it in that moment?
It wasn't really a moment. It was more of just like a gradual build. There was never a moment in time that I could pinpoint that I was like, okay, now I've made it, or like, now I'm successful. Like, and you know, like, it's just one of those things where every single day, if you put in the time, eventually you start to see some of the fruits of your labor, so to speak. And that's definitely how it was for me. Like I've never had a big career milestone that was like, boom, all of a sudden my life is different, and now I'm like making a lot of money, and now I'm doing this, and now I'm doing this. I never had that. Like for me, this has been the slowest process that I could ever like. Yeah, it really freaking sucks sometimes. Like how slow this progress has been. But in reality, like you know, it's 2022 and I started in 2017, so really it hasn't been that long. But it feels like it's been really long. Like I'm 27 and I'm turning 28 in 15 days. So I feel old as hell.
Well,
like
yeah, that's the whole thing. Everything's getting younger, getting shorter. Like usually when people work traditional jobs, it's like get a job out of college, work until like 65, 70 and retire.
Yeah.
And then for music, you see artists start at like 17 and then make literal millions and then retire at like 25, and then like 25 and on they're done doing, like they can do whatever they want.
Yes.
And so
that is not me, unfortunately. But
well, so do you see music as something you'll kind of do for like well into your life, like for the rest of your life? How long do you see your music career going for?
yeah, that's a good question. I think my music career is going to evolve a lot before it fizzles out. What I mean by that is like I have an artist project right now, and that is my biggest focus, and that's like the project that I release my own original music under, and I tour under and play shows under, and you know, eventually there'll be a time where I feel like I'm too old to go play shows, and like no one wants to come see an old guy playing guitar. You know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, who knows? There's lots of old guys who still play guitar, who still sell out arenas. That's not what I mean, but like, for me, I think there will come a point where I'm like, I just don't know if this is worth doing anymore. And I think like music production is my biggest source of income, and the thing that I do the most in a week. And I don't see that ever really changing, because I think if you even look at like someone like Timbaland, or Dr. Dre, like they're still massive music producers,
Yeah.
and they're in their like 60s now, and they're still like making some of the biggest songs with like the freshest new artists. It's like these
Yeah.
guys are still legends and they're still doing it. But then also what a lot of um, musicians do as they get older is they start switching into things like film scoring.
Yeah.
And like that's something I've always wanted to do, is like make music for movies and like video games, and kind of delve into that world a little bit and focus less on like I'm trying to like make a pop top 40 hit for
Yeah.
somebody, and more like I'm trying to make this scene in this movie as cool as possible. Like I've always wanted to do that. I've yet to have an opening into that world, but it's one of those things I think that also just comes through time and experience. And you get one opportunity to do something and it might change your life, and you might get hired again to do it again. So it's like that's kind of just what I'm doing, is taking every opportunity I can get, doing the best job I can with it, and then hoping that leads to more opportunities.
And so, when you were talking about this kind of slow, gradual climb of your career, was there a moment where like it felt too slow almost, or like you were kind of wanting to take a break or quit or like just step back from music at all?
I love that. Literally right now, I'm in that right now. Like I'm not even kidding. Like lately, and see, this is where I feel a little bit like guilty and kind of stupid for saying that, because I'm still making a good earning, like a good living doing music. I'm still doing it full time. I have no need for another income source right now, and that is an amazing place to be for somebody who had always had people telling him he would never make a career out of music. So I'm in a good place with that, but lately just the slowness of everything has just really been getting to me. Especially as I'm, like I said, turning 28 in 15 days. I'm just like, man, like it's hard not to feel like I missed my chance.
Mm-hmm.
Like because when you see all the artists that are blowing up in the world today, they're all like really young.
Yeah.
They're all like either under 20 or like within 20 to 23 years old typically. You don't really often see any like 30-year-olds like blowing up anymore. And maybe there is, like maybe I just haven't noticed or seen, but I almost feel like that period of time where like older artists like Ed Sheeran, like he's like a year or 2 years older than me. Like artists like Adele, like she's a bit older than me. Like they were in the perfect moment in time where like people didn't really care about age, and it wasn't really like TikTok, the TikTok era yet. And I feel like I missed my boat to blow up then, and so now it's like, well, I'm like I don't check the boxes that I maybe checked 5 years ago. And so that's always in the back of my mind. That's always something I'm like a little bit like self-conscious about, and like lately especially that's kind of been wearing on me. But you just keep moving forward, and if an opportunity comes, you take it. But
and do you think that feeling of kind of slowness or unsureness uncertainty
yeah.
that's the word. Do you think that's kind of gonna prompt you to get into some of these other lanes like music, video game music, or like focusing more on production that you were talking about getting into?
Yeah, and actually it already has. Like I've started working with a publishing company to release, not even release, but like pitch wedding music to like movies and TV shows, and like even just straight up wedding videos, and like companies that do like wedding related stuff. Like there's this company that like they have all these connections in that world, and they basically asked me if I'd be willing to write them like 5 wedding songs and like or 5 like love songs.
Yeah.
And then they're going to start pitching these around to different companies and different shows and different things. And then like it's super easy for me to write, produce, and record like a love song because it's like kind of like my bread and butter a little bit. Like I can just write those like nobody's business. But like, and so it's like now when I've given them to this company, I've done my job, and now it's on them, and they're going to go find placements for those things. And obviously, placements pay pretty well, and it's also like residual income. So it's like not only do you get the upfront fee, but then you get royalties from it for as long as it exists. So it's like I'm basically at this point trying to like accumulate as many sources of passive income as I possibly can, so that I have more time to actually do the things that I want to do that might not actually pay.
Yeah.
Because if I have enough like residual income coming in every month to like, you know, keep the roof over my head and like my family fed, like that makes me feel like I've got a lot more time to try all these different projects that I want to try, like making video game music, for example. Because if I started making video game music tomorrow, no one's gonna pay me for it.
Yeah,
it's gonna be a passion project.
Get into that. Every new venue, every new kind of type of music almost that you get into, it's almost like you're back to square one. Like you're trying to find work in that realm, and so yeah,
definitely, yep.
And so on the more production side of things, when you're producing for other artists, how do you contact them? Do they contact you? Do you try to like regulate almost who you work with, or like make sure it's an artist you think you would mesh well with? How does that all go for you?
Yeah, so far every artist I've worked with has reached out to me or been put in touch with me from their management. And yeah, I mean it's weird because like most of the time it's because they've heard one of my songs, and I produce like 95% of the music I put out. There's a couple songs that I just put out that were co-produced with other producers, but like I would say the vast majority of the music I put out is just my production. And I started doing that mostly because I couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it. So I'm like, either I can like, you know, work this X amount of hours at my like other job at the time, to save up enough money to get one song recorded, or for the same amount of money, I could buy myself a set of speakers, an audio interface, a good mic, and the stuff that I need to make my own music. And then basically I have what I need to make a bunch of songs. So it's like, that's where I weigh it up. That's where I did weigh it up. It's like, am I going to pay some other person to make one song for me, and then I only get that one song? And if that song flops and it doesn't do well, well then I just wasted $3,000 on it. Whereas now I can put out a song that I made, that I like wrote, produced, and recorded myself. And if it doesn't do well, I don't really care because I've got hundreds more like in the queue, and it cost me nothing to do. So, and that's just been my mentality for a long time. That's what I've done for a long time. And people just started reaching out to me when they started seeing that my name was the only name in a lot of my production credits. And so they were like, hey, do you want to, like, I'm not sure if you produce for other people, but I'd love to work with you on a song. And then I'll do a song with them, and then they'll want to do like 4 more songs, and then they'll tell their friends, and then people will start finding out that I actually do produce for other people, and so they'll be hitting me up. Like my Instagram DMs has been like my primary source of like getting business, I guess. And random people literally just DM me all the time for like my rate and what I charge for, and like if I have time. And I usually try to make time for everyone. I usually don't like limit myself to a genre. I'm actually working with a country artist right now, and I know very little about country music, but I've like listened to a lot of it and learned a lot of like tricks and like little things. And She's very happy with the song, and so I just never say no unless I'm absolutely positive it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And if I try it and it sounds trash and they don't like it, well, I don't charge them for it.
And so, kind of when you produce, write, make your own music, when a song comes out and like you were the only person who like had the bulk of work on it, does that kind of give you a sense of independence or creative freedom to do with that rather than like trusting another producer, just kind of like here you go and seeing what they do with it?
Yeah, so there's pros and cons to both. Pros being that yes, like I can do it on my own time. I don't have somebody like looking over my shoulder and telling me that sucks or you should do this like this. Like I get to be like, I think this sounds so sick and I love it and I don't care what anybody says about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like my mentality going forward lately. Actually, is like I just want to make music I love, and if other people like it, I'm so glad. And if not, I really don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But on the side of cons, it's honestly really nice to have other creative minds as a part of your project, because I think of my music in one linear way, and it's really hard sometimes for me to break out of that way that I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I bring in another producer who's not used to my music, who who I haven't worked with, who has a whole different style, and they have their own linear line of seeing their music, well, then we both like cross these linear lines, and then they create something new that wouldn't have happened before. So it's like that's the power of collaboration that is really cool in many ways. But I've also had where that actually doesn't go well, and our ideas actually clash, and they don't work well, and then it creates something that doesn't sound good. But in the situations where it has worked, it usually is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so, once you had finished the base like 4 years of college, you took a year off and kind of came out with your debut album, and you kind of staked your career on that. You were like, depending on the performance of this, I'll either go back to school or continue music. What kind of led into that decision? And at the time, were you confident that it would do well enough for you to make a living off of it?
Yeah, you did your research.
I tried to.
Yeah, I mean, no one's ever asked me that specific question before. I was like, wait a second. Yeah, I had no idea if it was gonna do well. I was just like kind of like a dumb kid who just like did something he thought was really cool and his friends liked, and I was like, maybe other people will like this too. And yeah, I just put it out, and I was kind of like, I want to just take a year off, and I want to really work hard and play as many shows as I can, and take as many opportunities, and I didn't like, I was not lazy for a second that year that I took off. Like, and when I say that I took a year off, I meant that I still got a job in my field. Like, I got a job in my psychology field right out of university. It wasn't like as well paying of a job that I probably could have got, because I didn't want something that was going to be really hard to leave if I had to.
Yeah.
So basically, like, I worked with a school counselor for like 2 years while I was working to promote this record and play shows. And like, I would literally go to work from 7 a.m. till 3 p.m. and then the entire rest of the day I would be sitting in front of my computer, sending emails, filming videos, posting content, playing shows. Whether I had to drive 3 hours out of town to play a show or whatever, I took any show I could possibly get, any opportunity to perform that I possibly could get. And it was a really difficult couple years, but I think they really just taught me a lot about just hard work and the amount of work that it takes to be successful in this career. But yeah, at no point did I ever think that my record was going to do well. I honestly just like went on a whim, and I was like, I think this is great. I think this is the best music I've ever put out, and in fact, kind of the only music I ever put out. And then yeah, just kept working at it, and eventually, kind of things started falling into place.
Hmm. And then when you're coming up with a new song, you kind of mentioned it earlier. Some types of songs like love songs, you can just churn them out whenever you want. Do you try to kind of keep an open mind and just kind of let a song kind of form itself if you can, or is it kind of have you kind of found like a formula now, like start with this, do this, and then get a song?
I do have a formula for how I write songs, and more of that formula has to do with the process in which I do it. So, like, I'll always make the music first and then write the
Mm-hmm.
lyrics. And I usually write the song in order of occurrence. So, like, I have a really hard time writing the chorus before I write a verse.
Yeah.
And I've been co-writing a lot with some artists lately who always, like, all of them write the chorus first. And I don't know if this is a UK thing, because all these artists that I've been writing with are from England, and all of them, like, they don't even know each other, and all of them start with the chorus. And I'm like, is this like a thing in England? Like, I have actually never heard of that, but I struggle with that because I need the plot to be set by the verse before I can actually understand what the chorus needs to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to reverse engineer that, but um, yeah, like, I have this way of writing a song that sometimes is like weird, especially now with where I'm at in my life, where like I have to let the song tell me what it's about. I can't just like, it's hard for me to like make a production and then be like, I'm gonna write this song about this. Um, that's not how my brain works. Like, I create a production that I love without even thinking about it as a song to start with. I just like think about the production and making that sound really cool, and then based on how it sounds, based on how the emotions it makes me feel, it's almost like the instrumental tells me what it wants to be about.
Yeah.
And whether I'm going through a breakup or not, if it feels like a breakup song, I'm gonna write a breakup song.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because like I'm happily married, and a lot of the music I write is like breakup songs because I like minor chords, and I like very like moody sounds and stuff like that, and those usually typically lend themselves well to like breakups or
Yeah.
really like dark moody things that I currently am not going through in my life, but it's just what the song is about. It's
Yeah.
just begging to be written about that. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of how I
Yeah.
write. Yeah.
Well, when you get these kind of moodier sounds, anything like that, have you gone through that previously in life, or do you just kind of try to go based off of what you know from other people's experiences?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I go there in my own mind. I've had plenty of horrible experiences that have, given me quite a bit of personal experience to draw from, but also I get really inspired by movies and TV shows, and um, if I watch a movie that has, I'll like latch on to certain characters, or I'll latch on to certain like events that happen in a movie, and like most recently, I'm trying to remember what the movie was called. I can't remember. It was like a war movie, and I was watching it, and there was a scene where this guy like says bye to his fiance, who he's gonna come back and marry when he gets back from
Mm-hmm.
war, and then he dies in war, and like he tells like, his buddy, like, while he's dying and bleeding out, he like tells his buddy like to give this letter to his fiance, and like because, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, that's never happened to me, obviously, but like, just the idea of like, you you have to go do this thing, and then you've got this person
Yeah.
waiting to marry you at home, but then you die and you never made it back to them, and like, he has this letter that he wrote for her, and it's like, covered in his blood, and it's like very vivid, and like, I'm like, dude, like, that in and of itself just like gives me goosebumps, and I'm like, I gotta write a song, not about that, not about going to war and dying, but like inspired by those feelings that scene caused me to have.
Mm-hmm. It's a very
Yeah.
like intangible. It's like imagery or concept feeling. It's a lot of intangible things that you kind of build off of for a song.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, when you're coming up with a new song, do you feel like this algorithm that you've come up with has kind of helped you create your own unique sound in music, or do you try to like use a little bit of inspiration from other artists?
I mean, I'm definitely inspired by a lot of different artists. I I always find it funny when you ask, it's like the classic um, like a guy hitting on a girl and like asking her like, oh, she's like, oh, you're a musician, like I love music, and then he's like, oh, what kind of music do you like? And she's like, I like all music, like, and you're like, okay, really, like that classic thing. I kind of feel like I'm that person who's like, I like all music because I legitimately do.
Yeah.
There's not a single genre that you could name that I cannot find something to appreciate about. Maybe not like super dark like black metal like
Yeah.
death metal or whatever it's called. But like I appreciate metal. I used to listen to metal in like high school, and like I can still appreciate a good metal song. And like, you know, country I'm getting an appreciation for more than ever, and jazz and classical music and like Afro beats and like Spanish music and like or Latin music rather. And I just find it so interesting. Like I just think music is just so cool to explore, and I take so many different elements from all the different genres that I listen to. And I guess, yeah, like in a way, that does maybe create somewhat of a unique sound. I also feel like no one really has a unique sound anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like
Everyone's slightly inspired by something.
yeah, like there's literally nothing new. Like um, any artist that tells you that they're unique is probably lying, because it's like you're not, though. You're inspired by A, B, and C.
Yeah, all these other artists who have very similar songs.
Yes, so I mean that's always a tough question to say that I'm unique, because really I'm not. Like if you like Ed Sheeran, if you like John Mayer, if you like, you know, The Weeknd or Shawn Mendes or Justin Bieber, like you'll probably like my music.
Mm-hmm.
But if you like, you know, I don't know, Megadeth or AC/DC, like you're probably not gonna like my music if like you're really big into those. But maybe you will, because I play a lot of guitar solos in my songs. So like maybe like you'll get the occasional AC/DC fan who's like, you know, oh, this is actually a really good guitar solo. Like maybe I do appreciate this. So I kind of do feel like my music does sort of appeal to everybody, but it is certainly skewed more towards fans of the other artists I mentioned. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I don't know, I'm sure you've heard about this, but I think a little while back, Tiesto on his podcast talked about one of your songs. What
yeah.
was that moment like hearing about such a huge name in this industry discuss something you've made?
That was really cool. Definitely a highlight for me. Definitely, it's funny because it's literally on my bio now because I'm like so proud of that. But yeah, that was just like really cool, and it's also really unfortunate in a way because that song was about to be potentially huge, and it was actually a remix that I did with a producer from Chicago named Cryptogram, and he like remixed one of my songs, and we basically released a brand new version of that song called Wanting. And we got it signed to a label in the UK, and they got it all over BBC Radio 1, which is the biggest radio station in the world, arguably. And then from there, it started trickling into like across Europe. It was like a house remix, so it's like all the house channels in Europe, or not all, but a lot of the house channels like started picking the song up and playing it. And it was getting played a lot in clubs in the European house scene and the club scene there. And like, we honestly felt like the song was like on the verge of potentially blowing up. And then Tiesto put it in his podcast and, you know, featured it. And we're like, holy crap, like this could actually be really big. And then boom, like COVID-19 happened. everything started shutting down. All the clubs started shutting down. Because you have to realize, like, songs like that are born and bred in the club scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you can't.
People hear it
No,
while dancing, and then
yes,
they're like want to try to find the song and
yes,
whatnot. And so if you don't have that, you don't have that catalyst to kind of get their attention.
absolutely. And like all those songs, like, they're tested out in the clubs, and if people react well in the way they should to them, you're like, okay, this song could potentially be really big. And yeah, we were just in that process of having this song tested out in a bunch of clubs, and like people were reacting really well to it, and then that's why it was getting all this play on BBC and Tiesto and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, all the clubs closed, and now it's practically unheard of. Like, nothing's happened with that song since. So it's like really crappy timing. Like, it was. I still wonder, like, what would have ever happened had. I mean, I'm sure everybody wonders
what could have
been.
been.
Yes, but there's no point in dwelling on that. And yeah, it is what it is. But it was still definitely a huge, like, milestone for me to hear my song on his podcast.
And so, have you had any interaction with Tiesto himself after that, or has it just kind of been him mentioning you and your song?
Yeah, my only interaction with him has actually been through his team. I've actually had the opportunity to, like, write a couple hooks for him for certain things. Not sure if they're ever going to get used, but yeah, like, I've had contact with his management and his label, but I've never spoken to him directly. So it would be kind of cool though.
And this one particularly kind of hit the club scene, but a lot of your songs have picked up virality in one way or another, or like have found their kind of own, like a life of their own almost. And I think you've made your songs have made their way onto a few soundtracks of shows on Netflix. So what was it like kind of having these songs portray like cinematic moments or settings, kind of going back to like what we were talking about with movie music?
Yeah, honestly, super cool. Like, it's something I wish I could do more of, and hearing my song on a show is like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it's just like so weird. You're like, this is like that's me. You're like, that's literally my voice in this Netflix show. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't think that feeling could ever get old. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about, like, just this interest I have in, like, creating music for moments rather than for streams. And so, like, I think it was really cool because, I mean, it's not like I chose my song for that specific moment. Like, there's a person called a music supervisor who picks music for television scenes and stuff, and they just happened to pick my music. So I didn't have any part in that other than saying, yes, you can use my song. But I think it would be really cool to, like, be given an opportunity to, curate something like that myself. Like, being, like, given a scene and, like, someone saying, okay, like, write a song for this scene, or write a score or instrumental for this scene. Like, that would be so cool.
Have you gotten any kind of payment or royalties from your songs being used, or has it just kind of been exposure and usage?
No, definitely. Like, they pay you up front. When you agree to let them use the song, they usually write you a proposal that says, we will pay you this much money for the use of this song in this scene of this episode of this show, which drops at, there's like this big contract you have to read, and then you do get royalties. So, like, you have to be signed up for all these different royalty collecting agencies, and then it's usually quarterly, so 4 times a year I get a check, which is always comes up as a surprise, and it's always a really nice surprise. So it's like, oh, perfect! Like, I like, that's exactly what I just needed out of nowhere. So they're nice little surprise checks that come out every now and then.
So, at the moment, are you signed to a label, or are you still independent at the moment?
Still independent.
Okay.
Yeah, I would potentially be open to a label. I don't really know. It's an interesting thing because if you would ask me last year, I would have said absolutely 100%. But now I'm kind of like, I don't know, because once you're signed to a label, you basically like owe them
Your career.
your career. Like you're now indebted to them. It's
Yeah.
like taking out a loan, right? You still got to pay the loan back. You can't just like get the money and run. Like
It's
and
not a charity industry.
no, not at all. And so like often what I tell artists who are like super obsessed about getting a record deal is like I'll ask them, I'm like, first of all, why do you want a record deal? And then if they say, oh, like I just really would love to get an advance, I'm like, yeah, but like you have to pay that back. And if your record sales don't pay that advance back, well, you're going to get dropped and you're going to get, red lighted from the label to all other labels, and you're never going to get signed again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, so I usually just say, like, maybe instead of like getting a label, maybe look for like an investor, like somebody who's willing to just like, who really believes in your career and like will give you, who's just rich and like wants to, support a cause that they believe in. And like, I have a buddy of mine who like someone just gave him like $100,000 to like pursue music, and like because they believed in him, and they like my friend has to give that guy a percentage of his like income now, but it's such a small percentage, and the guy he wasn't even really concerned about that. Like he was like, I just want to support you. I think you could do great things, and I if I can play a role in that, like I'd love to do that. He's just this like stupid rich guy who's like got so much money that he doesn't know what to do with, and obviously it's I can't say that everybody should find that person because it's pretty hard. I haven't found that person, but yeah, I don't think labels are as appealing as they maybe once were.
So do you think music's kind of heading towards a more independent scene? And like now we have all these platforms like Apple Music, like Spotify, trying to highlight independent artists, trying to give them a bigger platform even without a record deal. So do you think in the future we'll start seeing kind of a shift towards more just like artists and musicians rather than record deals versus independent artists?
Yes and no. I think like record labels will always have a leg up on independent artists just because they control the industry. Like unless you're Chance the Rapper, who's like, he's got enough sway as an independent artist that he can literally make Spotify and Apple Music do whatever he wants at any given moment because he generates so much traffic for them.
Yeah.
But most, and by most I mean like 99% of independent artists do not have anywhere close to the kind of like sway or reach that someone like Chance the Rapper has. And a lot of that is really, you can only really achieve it with a label. Like I've heard it said that like there's only really a certain level that you can get to as an independent artist, and if you want to go any further than that, you almost need a label.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like a gate. Like you do all your things, you like get through the maze, and then you hit the peak, and you're outside of this big huge gate, and behind that gate is like all the fame and fortune, and like that's like where you're gonna be like, Justin Bieber level. And the only way you can get through that gate is if you
are with a label.
If you get a label to come in and get you through that gate, because the gate most often doesn't open to independent artists, and you can't get access to a lot of the opportunities without a label. So it's really weird. Like, and someone might say that everything I just said is a load of crap, but that's as far as I understand it to be.
That's your experience with it. So.
That's my experience, and that's what a lot of people that I know's experience has been, is that, you can be independent up to a certain point, and then you need a label, but you can also be incredibly successful without ever having a label.
Yeah.
And in fact, like there's a lot of independent artists who probably make a lot more money than artists at the same level who are signed to a label. Yeah. The amount of people that I've heard of who are like completely broke and like working 5 jobs in LA to pay rent, who are signed to a label, it's like there's hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
of artists who are like signed to a label that doesn't prioritize them. They're working their butts off trying to pay rent, living in an expensive city like LA, and you know, eventually their label is going to drop them because they have a couple bad releases that don't get any streams, and their label's like, okay, well, we don't think you've got the potential we thought you had, so we're going to drop you. We're sorry. And then they're, like, then what do they do?
Yeah.
So it's almost, in a way, it's almost better to like build your career as an independent, so that when the labels start coming after you, you can very easily, just as easily as you could say yes, you could also just as easily say no, because you might not need the label. Like, why would you want to give up a percentage of your masters? Why would you want to give a percentage of your career and your income when you're already making a lot of money just by releasing music by yourself? Like, that would be the goal for me. Is like, I'd love to get to the point where I'm getting like millions and millions of streams because I've accumulated that level of a following.
Yeah.
And I'm making, I don't know how much money on streaming a month. And I'm just like, yeah, like, why would I want to give 50% of this away to a label for what?
And then it's also like, if you sign a certain contract with the label at like a young age, it's so easy to grow up and have different desires or different thoughts and then want to back out. And that's kind of where we hear all these kind of horror stories about labels, like with Why Don't We, Taylor Swift, all these labels that have gotten huge like backfire from artists in their label because they just weren't happy with how their deal worked out.
Yep, exactly. And that happens a lot more often than you would think. Like Taylor Swift kind of, that was major news because it's Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff happens so much more than you would ever think it does. With like a lot smaller artists that aren't gonna make news headlines like Taylor Swift, but such a common occurrence. It's really, really sad.
And so you kind of got like a once in a lifetime opportunity, and whether it's your song or you're producing for someone, if you got the chance to work with any artist, any group in the world, who would it be?
Oh man, honestly, I would probably have to go with Ed Sheeran. Mm-hmm. He is the reason I started writing music, like hands down. And it's funny because like I'm not as big of a fan of his newer stuff. Like his new album was like not. It wasn't. I probably listened to it all the way through maybe 2 or 3 times, and I haven't gone back to it since. But I still listen to his older music all the time.
Yeah.
But regardless, like, just the influence he's had on me, and the fact that, like, in many ways I owe a large part of the reason I do this to him, I think it would just be, like, such a full circle moment for me to someday be able to write a song with him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would just be, like, something else. He's one of the greatest songwriters, I think, of this generation, and, like, like him or not, like his music or not, like there's no one who writes hits as easily as he does. And yeah, he's just a phenomenal songwriter, and I think his story is incredible. And I don't want to be that guy, but I've been a fan of Ed Sheeran since way before anybody else knew about him. Like, or at least anybody else here. Like, I've been following his career for years. Like when he was still like homeless in England.
He wasn't exactly in the Billions Club on Spotify when you found out about him.
No, not at all. And so just to see how he went from being like a scraggly homeless dude who played in dingy bars in England to like being the biggest name in music. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's almost like watching a friend become successful who you believed in the whole time. And you're like, I knew you would be something. I knew all along. And that's how I feel about Ed Sheeran.
Or it's like watching your favorite show where like the main character has a journey, and like now in a certain episode they like get past the main story arc, and you're like, yes.
Yes, yes, that's it. That's how I feel about Ed Sheeran. So I think, yeah, for me, he'd be the dream collab for sure.
Do you have like a venue that you would really love to play at one point in your career, or like a dream venue for you?
Yeah, I mean, the O2 Arena in London and Madison Square Garden. Those are two. Those are two venues that yeah. If I ever got to even set foot on the stages in there, I think I'd probably pass out. Like, just yeah, so cool. Like, I mean, even honestly, like the Forum in LA. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen John Mayer there, and John Mayer is another one of my biggest inspirations, and very close second dream collab to Ed Sheeran. And yeah, I love the Forum. I thought it was a really cool venue, but like Madison Square Garden and the O2 are like so iconic
Yeah.
that I think yeah, any form of a performance on either of those stages would be unbelievable.
And so you're still pretty early on in your career, but so far, has there been a song that you've released that you kind of have a certain attachment to, or that is your favorite song?
Yes, I released a song a few years ago called "I'd Leave My Happy Home for You." I think to this day still that is my favorite song I've ever written, and I wrote that song when I was like kind of crappy at songwriting, so it was just like one of those one-offs that I have never been able to replicate. And I have sang that. I've been asked to sing that song at so many weddings. I've, you know, I get requested that song every time I play a gig anywhere. Um, every time I play it, like people, the room just goes silent. Like there's something so special about that song to me that I actually like brought it back to be on the album that I'm putting out next month.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's that like I just had to. I haven't actually released a physical CD since 2017, and the one I'm releasing is coming out on May 20th, and I just had to have that song on a record. Even though it's really old, and even though a lot of people might be like, "Why is this on the record? You released this like 4 years ago." I don't really care. I want that song to be on a physical disc. I want that song to be on an actual record, and as part of a large project, just because it just means so much to me, and it's like such a special song for my career and like in my songwriting journey, that I just needed to have it on the record. So that song's my big one. That's the one that I has always just been with me, and I love playing it live still.
With a song like that you care so much about, and that has basically been with you for most of your career, are you like scared almost to try to like remix it or have like a new version of it, anything like that? Do you just kind of want to leave it as is and just let it be and let it have its own life without trying to make it better, quote unquote, with a remix, a feature of a new artist on it, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't think that I'm that precious about it that I wouldn't want to change it up. In fact, it'd be really cool to have a like a duet, like say with like a female artist on it, like that. Like I would totally love that. Like, and in fact, I've been playing that song live for so many years now that I often do just change it up a little bit, and I'll play like a different. I have like the sad version of it now, because the song is pretty like romantic and upbeat and like very positive in tone. But I actually came up with like a more like sad version of it.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's actually really sick. Like it just completely changes the entire vibe of the song, but not in a way that like ruins the integrity of what it is. It's just like a new way to think of it. It's a new it brings up new emotions that the original doesn't, while still keeping the theme intact. Because it's like it could be sung as a sad song and a happy song, but the meaning still stays the same in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm totally like open to doing whatever with it as long as it sounds good and it keeps the general gist of the meaning.
Yeah. All right. Well, those are all the questions I had for you today. Thank you so much for coming on. I feel like we touched on a lot, talked on a lot of topics, and yeah, where can people find you online? Websites, social medias, anything you have? Where can people find you?
Cool. Yeah. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. You asked better questions than pretty much any interviewer I've interviewed with in a really long time. So I really appreciate that you actually
Well,
did your
thank you,
homework.
and thank you for accepting to come on.
Of course. Yeah, it was great. But yeah, my music's all over the internet. It's just under Josh Sahunta, Sahunta. You can literally Google me and everything will come up. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, YouTube, everywhere, basically. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and if you're in the Edmonton, Canada area, I have a massive release party for my upcoming CD on May 28th. So there's tickets available for that as well online. And yeah, my new album Melodrama comes out May 20th. I'm very excited for that. I've been working on this basically since just a little bit before the pandemic started, and have been perfecting it over the last few years. So it's finally done, finally coming out. Really excited for it. It's obviously the best music I've ever put out, and yeah, really excited for people to hear it.
All right. Well, yeah, keep an eye out for that. Thank you again for coming on,
thanks.
And I'll leave a link to some of that down below. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.